Wakanda Forever! Oh, that makes me deeply uncomfortable. Please don't do that again. Look, Wakanda Forever. I got back from it last night with my girlfriend. We talked about our thoughts on it, and now I'm here to give you my thoughts on it. So let me just start out right from the gate saying I love this. This was a great, wonderful movie. I loved it. Now, that said, let me get some of the stuff I didn't like out of the way. Because there's not a lot I didn't like. But there is things that I felt could have been either improved upon, taken out, or, just reworked a little bit. So first and foremost, and I think this is um, the big issue ultimately with the movie. And there's not a lot. There isn't a lot of issue with the movie, in my opinion, but there is some. And the big thing is, one of the things I had heard from one of the reviews is that the middle of the movie, the second third, dragged on a little bit. And after watching it, I can firmly say I agree with that. It's not like anything we're watching is uninteresting. There's still interesting stuff going on in the middle of the film. The turmoil in Wakanda, the stuff with Namor, the stuff with Shuri. Stuff on the Kia. There's still things, Everett Ross's stuff. Like, there's still stuff going on there that is interesting to watch, and I'm still invested in the movie. But from the attack, from when do we, what's the best I can say? Hey, like I always do, nothing I say is something that, I'm not going to mention anything that isn't already in a trailer or a clip or anything like that. And there's a fight scene on the bridge. You saw that in the movie. There's a fight scene on the bridge between Okoye and some of the Talokan. From that point until we get to the attack on Wakanda that you see in the trailer, it seems like it's trying to just get kind of set up why things are happening and if we'll get a resolution or not. So on that ground, I admit the film does struggle a little bit. It starts out strong though, and it ends strong, and that's what really matters ultimately. That you have a strong start and a strong finish. If your middle meanders a little bit, that's one thing. Like Avengers Endgame has one of the best ends ever of a comic book film. Period. Middle, definitely kind of good. It takes its time a bit. And I'll admit, it doesn't have the greatest start, but it has a solid start. So, in that sense, you can see how a movie can save itself from having a somewhat slow middle. I'll also say this, that you could feel the absence of Chadwick Boseman. What I mean by that, and it's on purpose that you feel the absence of him, but what I mean by that is, Shuri, as you kind of can guess from the trailers, is kind of our main character, but everyone has a main part to play. Like your big three main players are let's say your big five. You have obviously Namor, who's the big threat. You have Shuri, who's kind of your main lead, more or less. You have Ramonda, who is the queen. And then I would argue then Okoye and Riri might be your big five leads, or your main leads, if you will. And they're all fantastic performances. Obviously, it's Angela frickin' Bassett. Winston Duke loves seeing M'Baku do anything. But you're missing that lead power that someone like Chadwick had. That he just had that air about him, that quality to him that, unfortunately, Letitia Wright doesn't quite have as much. Angela Bassett certainly has, but she's not necessarily our focus in the same way that Shuri is. So the film is lacking on that as well. But that's enough of that. Everything else, let me tell you, this film emotionally destroyed me at least twice. And both involve funerals. Both scenes involve funerals. Because as you can clearly guess, people dying in this film. And obviously, the way they handled Chadwick Boseman's passing, I won't go into any details. I was surprised at how they handled it. They did not shy away from it. It was head on. Like, it starts with basically the passing of T'Challa, and how he passed how he passes is something that very much surprised me. Like I was actually like I should have seen that coming, but I was very surprised at how they did that. And just how much I was also surprised at how tasteful it surprisingly was. And then you get into the funeral where I was, man, when you see how everyone's reacting and just the feeling and uh, man, the somber yet joyful, the celebration of life, and the same as the mourning. Man, it kind of crippled me emotionally because I was getting flashbacks to my losses in life, and then something else happens in the film which also crippled me emotionally, even worse. That what happened later on in the film, and no spoilers on that, but what happens later on in the film compare comparatively, that almost like ended me right there. I'm like, oh dear freaking god, no, 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 because again, in my head, flashbacks, and what it ultimately meant for other characters in the movie. And like, there's always an air of Chadwick Boseman, like his presence is still always felt in the movie, and there's a scene that is the first part of a clip that came online when Namor confronts the Queen Shuri, where they're talking about, or Ramonda's talking about thinking about him, and she swore she can feel his arms, and Shuri's just like, but it wasn't real. It's just a conjuration your mind created and all that. And then Ramonda kind of just claps back at her with a line like, okay, well then what does your mind conjure when you think of him? And she doesn't have an answer to that. This whole, a huge part of this movie, a huge plot and theme of this movie is grief and loss and pain and what that does to you. And the steps you will go to try to alleviate that or rectify it or get justice for it. And it's so heartbreaking because you see characters go down paths you would not think they'd go down. No one is necessarily faultless in this to some degree or another. Namor is not faultless for what he's doing, but he's also not. But he, as I'm afraid, he's. I'll talk about Namor in a second because Namor's really good. I'm just trying to figure out exactly how I want to phrase that sentence. Namor is not without issues. Ramonda is not without issues. Shuri's not without issues. Like no one here. Okoye is not without issues. So yeah, there's no clean, easy way of going about it. The scene in the U.S. The United Nations Senate is just is Ramonda as a leader just being boss bitch to 1,000%. That is like mic drop moment. That scene that is freaking awesome. Shuri has these wonderful moments. She's got some great moments with M'Baku. Her and M'Baku have some great play on each other, especially given the circumstances. Absolutely. Okoye, you see Okoye as much more as you've always seen Okoye as a person, absolutely, but now you see her vulnerable for the first time, pretty much ever. That scene, she gets a great fight scene on the bridge, and that scene is just awesome. And it kind of shows like her as a warrior, but her as a friend as well. And then the preceding scene involving her and what happens to her, you feel like it's not justified, but at the same time, you can't blame why it's happening. It's all about the choices. This film is all about the choices we make in the wake of grief, in the wake of pain, in the wake of loss. And no one is making the right choices 100% of the time. Shuri, sure as shit, is not. Riri's not even doing it, because of course Riri's a different thing. Okoye is not doing it. Namor is not necessarily doing it, but he's not necessarily not doing it. Even Ramonda is not making always the right choice. Some of her choices are just coming from an emotional place of pain and loss. So I love that. The action sequences are far better than the first Black Panther. We were talking about that, kind of like comparing it last night, me and my girlfriend, where like comparing the action sequences in the original Black Panther to this one. I'm like, okay, you got the fight scene in the forest at night, which I got to admit, thinking back on it, is not that good. It's too shaky cam, it's too dark. But then you get the two ceremonial fights, which are really good. You get the car chase sequence in what was it, Korea or something like that. going after Claw. That was a great sequence, awesome sequence. Then you get the climax, which part of it's good, like the battle on Wakanda versus the fight between Killmonger and T'Challa, which is a little rubbery and CGI. Here, no, like this is the attack on Wakanda is brutal. It's awesome. It's creative. It is just it's great. I loved it. There's the fight sequence when they're getting Riri Williams on the bridge. That involves Riri Williams, them meeting her, because that clips out where they meet her. That fight sequence is really good. The ultimate climax, Wakanda versus Talokan. That's all I'll say about that. It's great. Like there's the action in this. While there aren't as many action sequences, all the action sequences I think are a step above. 100%. The effects look far better. Riri. Now let's talk about Namor, because Riri falls into a weird category of pro and con. So, Namor, I thought they did Namor very well. I thought that he is definitely one of the more unique antagonists of the MCU. And I say that because he is not a villain. And that needs to be made very clear right now. There is actually no villain in Wakanda Forever. There is no real, there's no individual who is a villain. The closest would be a character that ends up showing up, but even then, they're not necessarily a villain. They're not the villain of the movie anyway. But no, Namor is not. He's an antagonist, to be certain, but he is not a villain, because when you really break down what he's doing and why he's doing it, he's justified in his actions. Now, his actions might have villainous tones and airs about them, but he is not. He's justified in what he's trying to do. He's trying to protect his people, ultimately. He's just going about it in a pretty destructive manner, and he's also someone who is willing to actually compromise when it meets his needs. And that was, which actually shows how good of a ruler and how good of a king he is. There's a scene involving M'Baku and Shuri, which kind of mirrors that, where they're talking about going, fighting Namor and what it's going to mean. And it illustrates what a good leader actually needs to have. Yeah, and it's coming it's coming from who you'd expect in that scene, not but it's still good, but it's still very poignant nonetheless. But Namor's great. Look, the feet wings, they might have been ridiculous in concept, but they make it menacing. They make it badass. You see him, he's almost like jumping off of the air. It's just cool looking. Namor is a fun, really interesting character. I can't wait to see what we do more with him. And yes, they flat out say he is a mutant in the movie. Like they say, he is a mutant. Now, clearly still in the MCU, mutants are a relatively new thing. But that said, and I'm just looking at my face in this, maybe it's the facial hair. I just look rounder than I used to. I've just gotten older. The weight of the world, the wrinkles up here in my face. Because trust me, I don't like to think I'm narcissistic, but I do look at myself in the mirror and be like, how different do I look? I can see a picture of myself on the wall right there from high school, 18 years old. As fresh as shaving, mind you. And I can definitely see the difference. I like to think I've aged pretty well. This is before I could grow a full beard too. I could grow a beard, but my face just seemed thinner. But maybe it's the camera. Maybe that's what's doing it. I don't know. Of course, I also had a haircut at the time, and I was shaving. So maybe if I shaved and I do need a haircut. My hair's starting to get on the long side. But that said, they do mention mutants are still a relatively new thing. We don't know how long some of them have been around. We know Miss Marvel's a mutant. Kamala Khan's a mutant. We know that Namor is a mutant. Trying to think of any other characters who may have shown up that are in fact mutants. Uh, Technically speaking, Thanos is actually a mutant. But he's an Eternal with a deviant gene. He is technically a mutant, though not by any real stretch of by not any stretch of the imagination, not by the Earth standards anyway. But yeah, I don't know how they're going to handle mutants. They're just slowly starting to pepper them in. And we had mutants show up, obviously, in Doctor Strange, the Multiverse of Madness. I had a brain fart on that. We had mutants show up because American Chavez is, I believe, actually a mutant. And obviously we had Professor X show up there and whatnot. But Riri Williams, Ironheart. This is our first introduction to the character. And the question on whether or not the Ironheart series was going to work was really going to hinge on how we kind of perceived her in the show. Like, for instance, I don't know if the Echo show is going to work because they didn't do a good job at illustrating Echo and why Echo is cool or someone we would want to root for. That said, however, facelift. That said, however, with Riri Williams, initially I was a little skeptical because there's this clips out where she's basically they come to get her. And she just starts throwing shit because she's like, oh God. And then Okoye just pulls out a spear and she's about to throw something else. And I'm like, okay, girl, read the room. They're here for you. They're going to take you regardless. They'll explain along the way what's going to happen. And then, so maybe stop attacking them and throwing shit at them and hear them out. And then later on, like the FBI come in, it's like, this guy's one thing, but you brought the FBI to the door. I'm like, I get why you're upset, but read the situation. Like the FBI and they even say this is the least of your problems right now. Are you freaking kidding me? So, and by the way, the Talcon, let's call them the Atlanteans. The Talcon. They're Atlanteans, but the Telecon, as long as you're not near a body of water connected to the ocean, they can't get you. So, like, I don't know what the hell you're going to worry about. CIA is going to get you, keep you away from the water. It's all good. But yeah. But after that, the character ultimately does grow on you. I still don't know how I feel about the character, the whole thing. You're making an Iron Man suit? Like, yeah, like you're making your own Iron Man suit. This girl's apparently a genius. So, I don't know. I didn't hate her. Like, well, she's likable after a certain point. It's just, and that her Iron Man-ish suit is cool looking. I like it. It's kind of basic, mind you, but I like it. So, I don't know. I'm at least interested in the Ironheart series. At least. Ultimately, though, look, this film that was brilliantly acted. It's a little awfully paced, but it's got great action sequences. The emotional payoffs are very much there. And then that mid-credit scene. I like the mid-credit. It's a very well put mid-credit scene. I hope it's not what it might be implying down the line, but I do like what they did with it. It was a very heartfelt scene. It does set some things up for the future. I will say, though, after now knowing this is the end of Phase 4, look, Kevin Feige, I love you. You did not give us a clear idea of where this is. We know ultimately what it's leading to. It's Kang Dynasty and Avengers Secret Wars. But how it does it, you implied that you were giving us an idea, or that we'd have an idea of where like the Marvel Cinematic Universe is going at the end, near the end of Phase 4. Well, we're at the end of Phase 4. Apart from knowing Kang Dynasty and Secret Wars are coming, I don't have a very strong idea of where it's coming, because if we really break it down, Black Widow doesn't count. Shang-Chi. Okay, we know Shang-Chi, the 10 rings are tech. And if the Quantum Mania trailer is anything to go by, it looks like it might be Kang tech. That's what it looks like it might be. At the very minimum, it might be Kree tech, but it might be. It looks like it might be Kang tech based on the way those rings look. So we know that, and they're sending a signal somewhere. We just don't know where. So we got that. Okay, Shang-Chi, great. Spider-Man is out there. Okay, Spider-Man No Way Home. Spider-Man's still out there. All right. Doctor Strange, Multiverse of Madness. Multiverses are a thing, and there's a possible incursion event coming into the MCU, which might be leading into Secret Wars. What did we have after that? Thor: Love and Thunder. Hercules is going to come after Thor at some point. Great. And, and Natalie Portman into Valhalla. Wonderful. Oh, and they have the little mini Love. Yeah, they have Love. And then we have this where I'm not going to say what happens, but we have that leading up. But it doesn't really tell us anything about where the MCU is ultimately going. The closest idea we have is really Shang-Chi. That's the closest one we have. But look, I'm not someone who usually harps on that. I'm just bringing it up. And I think Quantum Mania is actually going to give us a big idea of where we're going after the fact. And Quantum Mania is coming up fast. That's February. We're already in November. That means we only got December, January. We got basically only 3 months to wait for Ant-Man and the Wasp. So, excuse me. Oh, God. So, ultimately, yeah, while I would like to have a better idea, it's not a deal breaker for me or anything like that. Still, Wakanda Forever, I thoroughly enjoyed it. It may be in the top 10 MCU. It may not be. I'm going to do a re-upped list now that this is out. Maybe not. Maybe next week. My ranking the Marvel movies, the MCU movies. So keep your eyes out for that. Until then, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Like, comment, share, subscribe, and Wakanda Forever. And we miss you, Chadwick. Have a good one.